It's been 10 whole years since it all began. With every entry, the franchise inched further and further away from survival horror and closer towards action. Now, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing, at least to Capcom, which was proven with the sales of Resident Evil 4. However, not everyone was happy with this departure, namely a Capcom producer by the name of Minoru Nakai. So let's see what he did about it. During the mid-2000s, before the smart device boom, Nintendo's DS and Sony's PSP were the dominating force in the handheld gaming market. On one hand, we had more powerful hardware with a bigger screen. On the other hand, we had touchscreen controls and a microphone. Nakai wanted to port RE1 onto one of these handhelds in order to help newer fans of the series, which were mostly brought in by RE4, know where the roots of Resident Evil really come from. Well, so which one wins? The DS, of course. Turns out, its unique hardware design won Nakai's heart over, and so the porting began. Resident Evil Deadly Silence was released in February of 2006. Although this was meant to be a direct port, there were a number of changes and improvements. First of all, thank God they included instant knifing. Deadly Silence features a rebirth mode, where players are pitted against an increased number of zombies while enjoying new puzzles that make use of the touchscreen and microphone. Though enjoying might be an overstatement, since those segments feature things that have been done many times over in other titles. Though being able to see the map constantly on the top screen is very, very helpful. I don't even want to remember how annoying it was to pause and open the map every time in the original.
I guess it is nice to see the DS's features being used even in a classic like RE1, but Nintendo had another neat creation around the corner waiting for devs to get their hands on: the Wii. Right from the start of RE4, the Umbrella Corporation had already been taken down. Other than a brief prologue, players didn't get much of an explanation as to why. Producer Masachika Kawata felt it was important to expand on that part of the story, especially for the newer players. Well, what better way to do this than dedicating an entire game to it? Initially, this title was going to be developed with the same gameplay style as RE4, featuring all the past main protagonists. However, because Kawata believed the majority of the user base on the Wii were casual gamers who enjoyed playing on lower difficulties, he felt creating an on-rail shooter was much more suitable. Couple that with the Wii's intuitive motion controls, anyone could easily pick up and play, without having to worry about item management, character movement, or even getting lost.
This'll get ugly. Fall back!
The game was released in November of 2007, called
Resident Evil, The Umbrella Chronicles.
All the important events behind RE0, RE1, and 3 can be found summarized in separate scenarios, along with an extra one covering the fall of Umbrella. Despite Kawata's intentions of satisfying the casual audience with a more straightforward shooting game, it actually turned out pretty good. The graphics looked crisp, camera moved smoothly, and it really felt like I was experiencing the past Raccoon City incidents through the eyes of the characters. Also, being able to interact with a number of objects in the environment made the experience more than just a bland on-rail shooter. Though of course, Umbrella Chronicles was not aiming for survival horror, meaning the music also had to be remixed into more upbeat versions of the past. Last but not least, there was the co-op mode. Kawata felt people would naturally form a two-man cell when traversing dangerous areas. With that in mind, he tried to spawn and place enemies in such a way that both players had to hold their own to survive. Even with QuickTime events, meaning if your buddy screws up, you're both gonna take it. Or you can cheat a little by doing this.
It's been over a year since the release of PS3 and Xbox 360, and by now it was clear that the HD era was officially upon us. Though, how was Capcom planning to make their mark with Resident Evil? Because RE4 was a massive hit and created such huge impact on the video game industry, the devs felt they should build on this formula. I mean, it does make sense. At the end of the day, for any business, it's all about the sales. Producer Jun Takeuchi led the team and began the creation of
Resident Evil 5.
Darkness has always been used as a tool for increasing fear factor ever since RE1. But with the increased power of the new consoles, the devs wanted to create an atmosphere that pushed the limits of the hardware. Sunlight was the answer. Back on the PS2, shadows had to be meticulously self-crafted, then adjusted. However, the PS3 and 360 allowed for natural shadows from any light source, which opened up a world of possibilities. A few of the designers booked their tickets and headed straight for Kenya, Africa. Not only was this a great location for a bright setting, but in terms of the Resident Evil timeline, it could also answer the mystery of how the progenitor virus originated in Africa. Over a few thousand photos were taken for the creation of the stages. A number of weapons in RE4 were fictional, made up by the dev team. Ever since then, Takeuchi noticed a wave of requests to include realistic firearms in the next entry. To satisfy these fans, he asked a friend of his from the Japanese Self-Defense Force to bring sample accessories, clothes, and weapons which included an RPG replica. As for choosing characters, the team had no doubt they wanted to use Chris Redfield, since he hasn't had many major roles since RE1. With 10 years down his belt, buffing him up a bit made sense. Or a lot.
What the hell happened in here?
Though of course, he needed a person to guide him through this foreign country, Africa. Thus, Sheva was born. She went through many design concepts. The devs went through over 50 variations before arriving at the final design, because they wanted to combine two qualities in her: feminine attraction and the strength of a fighting woman. The Resident Evil series has been known for its high-quality visuals, but this time, the devs wanted to take things to a whole new level, matching that of Hollywood production. The best way to do this? Bring it straight to the source. The teams from both US and Japan collaborated, working through storyboards, props, actors, real-time motion capturing, facial capturing, stunts, virtual cameras, and pre-visualizations. Though high-quality visuals wouldn't mean anything in the game if it wasn't accompanied by high-quality audio as well. To achieve this, the team again summoned the talents of Hollywood and recorded various pieces composed by Kota Suzuki in a 100-man orchestra held at the 20th Century Fox studio. It's hard to imagine how much money Capcom poured into this project. Well, let's see how it all turned out in the end. The game was released in March of 2009 called Resident Evil 5. Events carry off 6 years after the fall of Umbrella. Chris Redfield is sent by the BSAA to investigate a possible BOW smuggling in Africa. He soon meets up with partner Sheva. The two attempt to rendezvous with Alpha Team, but eventually learns of their untimely death. Together, they push forward in search of the bioterrorists and the whereabouts of Jill Valentine. Resident Evil 5 sold very well, which also proved that the producers made the right choice by building on the RE4 formula. Can't say the classic fans were too pleased, but we'll get into that soon. First off, the game looks and sounds absolutely amazing. The time, money, and effort spent in Hollywood all paid off. One noticeable feature is of course the co-op gameplay, which was done reasonably well. Players could hop in and out of matches online, as well as enjoy local split-screen action. Can't say Sheva's AI was the best.
I need a help!
Controls felt pretty much like RE4, but with a bit more quick-time events. Though the level layouts were very up and down. First couple of chapters, you're killing things left and right. Then all of a sudden, you're steering a boat solving puzzles. The puzzles themselves, however, were fairly bland and unimaginative. Now, these were just small things, compared to the real controversy with RE5. And I'm not talking about the racism allegations. No longer was survival horror the main stage. In fact, it's safe to say this was a straight-up action game. Your character is equipped with powerful weapons and a huge supply of ammo. Running away from zombies while fearing your life was now old news. Gunning down Maginis in hordes and with style was the future. Takeuchi admitted he took RE5 in the direction of games like Halo and Gears of War, since he thought that's what the audience wanted. Or, in my opinion, that's what would rake in the sales. All in all, I felt RE5 was a decent game. more specifically, a decent third-person shooter action game. About a year later, Resident Evil 5 Gold Edition was released, featuring new chapters, new costumes, move support, and more.
RE5 showed that Capcom was very capable of making a AAA title. In terms of production value, they've definitely come a long way. So now, which game were they going to apply their new skills to? Well, why not another on-rail shooter? Similar to Umbrella Chronicles, the team wanted to give the players further insight and a new perspective on the events of the past, more specifically RE2 and Code Veronica. Initially, the scenarios were going to be completely brand new, but the devs realized fans have completely connected with Leon's character ever since RE4.
How are you feeling?
Like $1,000,000.
With the help of another dev team, called Cavia, they were able to create high-quality cutscenes on the Wii's limited hardware. Though of course, to match the wonderful visuals, the vocals needed to be perfect as well. By using the voice talent of Paul Mercier, Leon's voice in RE4, they were able to do just that. Aside from these cosmetics, the team found a lot of aspects from the Umbrella Chronicles they needed to improve on, such as the fear factor, and making the player actually feel like they were in the character's shoes. To achieve this, they had one of the devs attach a camera to themselves, GoPro style, while running around and falling on the ground, so that they could accurately recreate what Leon and Claire's perspectives would have been like.
That's the Raccoon City Police Department.
The game was released in November of 2009, called
Resident Evil, The Darkside Chronicles.
Events are told through a few scenarios, a couple based on RE2, Code Veronica, and a new one called Operation Javier, which gives insight on Krauser's character along with what happened leading up to his role in RE4. Darkside Chronicles is overall an improvement from its predecessor. With the limitations of the older console's hardware, we couldn't see much of the character's expressions when something happened, but the devs did an amazing job this time around, especially with Alexia.
I still have some experiments to perform. Would you care to play along?
In terms of gameplay, your partner gets their own health bar, and herbs don't have to be consumed immediately, which are both awesome additions. However, things aren't perfect. Not when the camera shakes all over the place.
Well guys, that's all for today. And I think it's crystal clear what direction Resident Evil is now headed. So in the next episode, we'll see if the action route will prevail with the fans, or not.